Afternoon, Graham. How are you today?
I'm excellent, Peter. Thank you very much for having me on the show. It's my pleasure. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thanks for asking, and welcome to the Business Spotlight. It's great to have you here today. Can we start? Could you tell me a little about yourself and your business, please?
Absolutely, yeah. So, a brief introduction to myself. So, my name is Graham Curry. I am from Northern Ireland originally, so from the north coast of the country, up around like the Castle Rock kind of region is where I grew up. I recently completed my studies at Queen's University, so I studied business management there for 4 years. And yeah, I've been traveling kind of throughout the world, learning a lot of different things. So I moved to Scotland last year to work in the golf industry, which has always been a huge passion of mine. So that was kind of my first experience after university. And then I am now working full time on my own startup. So I started working on a project in university called Handicaddie, which we can obviously dive into a little bit more here. But yeah, now I have I guess, the blessing of being able to work full time and something that I'm actually really, really passionate about, which is, yeah, been really fun so far.
Yeah, I'm going to take a wild start. You said you're originally from Northern Ireland. You spent a bit of time in Scotland. I'm going to take a wild punt. You don't look like you're in Scotland or Northern Ireland right now.
Yeah, it's the sun blaring through the window that's giving that away. Yeah, so about 6 or 7 weeks ago, this was just kind of after receiving a bit of investment to go full time in my platform. I think it's always been a curiosity for me to live abroad and travel and see new things. So, and then Lisbon was one of the places that was on the top of my list for checking out. So yeah, so relocated to Portugal 6 or 7 weeks ago. Again, there's no real business advantage in terms of doing business here for me. There's not much of a golf caddying scene. However, the digital nomad community is what you would call them over here is phenomenal, and you meet so many like-minded people who are kind of in the same stage of your journey where you're starting a business. And it's been great for me because I've been surrounded by so much positive momentum around me, and it's infectious when you're starting off. And yeah, the Portuguese lifestyle is quite relaxed as well. So after you're done work, it's yeah, it's been great fun.
Fantastic. And whereabouts in Portugal are you? Did you say Lisbon? Did you say?
Yeah, yeah, capital city, Lisbon. So that's where I'm based at the minute. I've traveled around in the last 5 or 6 weeks just for various different things. So got down to the Algarve, of course, for a bit of golf as well. And yeah, looking forward to seeing more of the country while I'm here.
Good stuff. I reckon you're a pretty handy golfer, Graham. I'm a golfer, but I would not be taking you on for money. I'm going to say that right now.
Yeah,
Handicap or no handicap. So tell me a little. So Handicaddie, what it's about? I'm intrigued.
sure. Well, I guess you have to go back to when I was 13 or 14 and I started playing golf. So I've always been, I've always enjoyed the sport. Just I'm kind of a competitive person, so anything with like that individual element of self-improvement always appealed to me. And then one day a group of Americans arrived at my club, and I think they were like one guy extra and they needed a caddy to go out for the day. And I remember I was like just warming up for my round of golf, and the guy in the pro shop said, "Graham, run to the first tee, put on a bib. You're needed out there." And I thought, you know what? It's 100. I'll probably get 100 quid for this job. It's pretty good money for this age. So then that kind of started. That was my summer job over the next 4 or 5 years. So worked as a caddy. I kind of guess learned that skill and how to, customer service is a very important part of that. Being able to hold conversation for 4 or 5 hours. And then through doing that, I learned a little bit more about how the caddying industry was run. And I guess golf typically is quite a traditional sport, which is great in some senses, but also it can potentially hold clubs back from implementing technology and new things. And the caddying industry was very much that way. There was, a lot of pen and paper, a lot of spreadsheets. So I thought, I could maybe take a punt at helping a few folks out and solving this. So then, yeah, I was just turned 20 when I started working on a platform that would be, I guess you could say, like an Uber for caddies. It's like the connecting mechanism that helps them find jobs and then makes the golf club's life easier because they don't have to ring caddies for 5 or 6 hours. So that's kind of where the curiosity arrived, and that was like my original concept for the idea. And then I realized that caddying was very big in America, primarily in a lot of country clubs where a lot of like wealthy, lawyers and the high flyers in New York would go to play, and they like that experience. They like to have a caddy because it's a status thing, and also like it makes their round easier when you have a young guy, carrying your bag as well. So that was kind of the point when I realized that there was a big enough market to actually, make a business out of this idea.
And so who would be your ideal customer?
So we are a B2B service at the minute. So we sell directly to the golf clubs. So when I'm prospecting, I'm looking for usually country club in the title is quite a good indicator of the people I'm targeting. In Ireland, for example, it would be the links golf courses. So the ones that the tourists and the visitors would go to more often. So you mentioned there the likes of Royal County Down, Glass, which was our first customer. These would be more the high end golf clubs would be typically who I'd be going after.
And what would you say has been your biggest learning since starting your own business?
Wow, so many. I guess I had an illusion at the start that the time it would take to build an app and actually get users was very warped. And especially because I don't come from a technical background, I'm not a software native at all. So it was my assumption, Peter, that you put something out in the world and everyone will just flock to it if it's a good enough idea. And I didn't realize the amount of like outbound connection that would be required, the amount of sales and marketing, the amount of continued product development. So I think I was just oblivious to the amount of time that would actually be required. And I think a lot of people are like that when they're starting anything, really. They just don't realize how much time it will take to get good. Now, if I go back and analyze my journey, there's definitely things I could have sped up and done quicker. I could probably condense down these 5 years into, 1.5 or 2 if I knew now what I knew then. But it's kind of the case, you have to go through those learnings and mistakes as well when you're starting off, and kind of learn that way. So I think just patience and time is probably the 2 biggest learnings I've had so far.
And what would you say, who's the first person that comes to mind when you think of the word success?
Oh, that's tough. When I think of success, probably I think of athletes actually when I think of success, because I think of the amount of commitment and dedication it takes to be insanely good at their craft. So obviously golfers, I think Rory is a great example of someone. Some argue he maybe was naturally talented, but also you can't deny that he's worked incredibly hard on his craft. But yeah, I take inspiration from anyone that dedicates himself to their craft. And there's also a sacrifice to be great. You have to, it's a 10-year journey with most things in order to become exceptional at it. So I admire anyone that is willing to pay that cost of going on a journey for 10 years to get great at someone. But yeah, athletes, anyone that's successful in the business world. But I can't say there's one person in particular. I take inspiration from a lot of people.
And what would you say has been the biggest challenge that you've faced in your business?
I think early on, for sure, I guess the pushback to whether it was a good idea or not was a hard thing to take, especially when you attach a lot of your identity to your idea and you think, well, if someone doesn't accept this idea, they don't accept me. And like, I just realized then that you can't serve everyone. Like, not everyone's going to be your customer. So, a certain proportion of people, regardless of how fantastic you make this thing, will just naturally reject your offer. And that's totally fine. But I wasn't aware of that. So I took it quite harsh at the start. But yeah, now just being a bit more seasoned at selling. And like, I'm still super early in my journey as well. So I know I have so much more to learn, but I think being able to take that rejection just as feedback for what you can do better, I think has really served me well. But yeah, that was certainly a challenge at the start. There was some days where you kind of question what you're doing. But I'm sure everyone faces that to some degree whenever they're starting something new.
And what inspires you today, other than a bit of Portuguese sunshine? What gives you inspiration today?
Yeah, you're not wrong. Portuguese sunshine and a beer after the day. It's quite inspiring, actually.
We'll edit that out. You're making me jealous.
You can leave it in if you want. I don't mind. What inspires me? I've thought a lot recently about why I'm doing what I'm doing, and kind of looking intrinsically. And I think it's actually not the end result that inspires me, but it's more like, it sounds cliche, but it's like who I actually become during the process of the molding my company into something successful, and doing the hard work. And like there's some days where the process of doing it is very tough, but other days it's actually super enjoyable to like go through and have to face these difficulties. So I think I'm really trying to find joy in the work I'm doing and take inspiration from that, as opposed to focusing on the end result as much. And I know it's very difficult to do, because you need your North Star to like to go to and drive towards. But at the end of the day, like that is such a small part of your journey, whereas 99% of it is the journey itself. So I'm trying to find inspiration in that as my main fuel right now.
Now, it wasn't that long ago for you. It was certainly a lot longer for me than you. But if you could give advice to your 18-year-old self, you know, what would that sound like?
Yeah, so at 18, I hadn't even I knew I wanted to be involved in entrepreneurship in some way, but I didn't really know a path on how to start, I guess, because you got so many different elements. Like especially if you want to go into software, because you like, how do I find a guy to build the app? How do I find my first customers? But my advice would just be, just start early and just do the things that you're afraid of most, like straight away. Do, because at least for me, like I spent a lot of time kind of like in the ideation stage of like, is this a good idea? And then you seek validation from people who aren't even your potential customers. So I was asking like my friends, is it a good idea? Ask some family. And you can actually maybe be better directing that energy towards people who could potentially buy your service and getting feedback from them. And then, yeah, once you get the ball rolling and take your first steps, then it's amazing what you uncover. And like the journey is 100 steps. So if you just take that first one and just creep out the door, and then you have a look around and you're like, oh, I've learned something new here that I can then apply to my next step. And I think, yeah, for your 18-year-old self, it's quite overwhelming thinking like, how am I going to start this business? But I would just say like, it's okay. Just take your time, put one foot in front of the other. And yeah, be patient. It'll all work out eventually.
So let's look ahead. So let's think about Handicaddie and what it looks like. You know, let's finish this year off, 2024. So tell me what Handicaddie, if we could fast forward, say 12 months, you know, September 2024, what will Handicaddie look like then?
Yeah, so to give context, we've just raised investment from an American accelerator program, which has allowed me and myself and my team to go full time. So this next 12 months is basically just scaling up our revenue and expanding into more clubs. A big focus for us is the American country club market. Typically because they're bigger clubs, they have more caddy jobs going on day to day. And then they obviously typically tend to be higher paying customers. So I think that's a massive focus to break into the US. And we've just onboarded our first US customer. So yeah, hopefully by this time next year, we'll have a few more US country clubs that we'll be working with.
Excellent. And if somebody likes what they've heard, Graham, and would like to reach out, get in touch with you, what would be the best way to go about that?
Sure. I tend to be relatively active on LinkedIn. So it's just Graham Curry. I post, like, obviously golf is my business, but I also post little bits about how to start a company and give advice to people that maybe have an idea and how to transform it. So yeah, just feel free to message me at any time, and I'm happy to have a chat to see if I can help out in any way.
Super. Well, Graham Curry from Handicaddie, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Thanks for sharing your story, and I wish you all the success for the remainder of 2023 and beyond. Thanks very much, Graham.
All right. Appreciate it, Peter. Thank you.